Member for Gippsland East.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And I rise to make a contribution on the Energy and Public Land Legislation Bill 2024. And Speaker, as we've heard from those who have made contributions before me, this bill is to allow offshore wind developers to obtain tenure over public land for the construction of transmission infrastructure. Deputy Speaker, welcome to the chair. Now, Deputy Speaker, we're not opposed to acting Speaker, welcome to the chair. I thought you enjoyed that promotion very briefly. Now, we're not opposed to offshore wind development being explored, but there are a number of considerations, Acting Speaker, that we think need to be taken into account. And I just want to head down a slightly different path to some of the areas that previous speakers have covered off on. So rather than repeat the concerns that have been raised, I want to in particular talk about some concerns that are held by the commercial and recreational fishing industries and also communities around tourism. Now, this bill talks about the construction of transmission infrastructure, and we're well aware that that will obviously have implications on land. But state waters exist to 3 nautical miles offshore before we then move into federal waters. And so apart from land tenure responsibilities around building infrastructure and the like on land, this becomes a significant issue for both our commercial and our recreational fishing fleets. Now, when the federal government announced the Gippsland, the zone off the Gippsland coast for wind farm development, it seemed to give very little consideration to either the commercial or recreational fishing industries and also some tourist towns like Lakes Entrance. And the reason that I say that is the eastern end of that zone finishes right off Lakes Entrance. Now, they are key commercial fishing grounds, both inside the 3 nautical mile state waters and outside into federal waters. But the predicament we face here is, whilst the majority of wind farm developments are off the coast of the member for Gippsland South, who is here, the commercial impacts are on a sector that operates out of my electorate, that being the fishing fleet out of Lakes Entrance. And our commercial fishermen and women out of Lakes Entrance have had enormous pressures applied over recent years around loss of fishing ground. Now, that has included obviously the development of the oil and gas fields in Bass Strait, but there's also been exclusion zones for wildlife. There's been exclusion zones because of decisions made around alleged overfishing of some species and the like. But what it's resulted in the footprint diminishing. Now, whilst the wind farms will have the capacity to do that again, the wind farm infrastructure, where these cables will be coming ashore from the different wind farms, I'm assuming will likely have exclusion zones placed around them, because some of these fishing practices are fishing on the ocean floor. Now, as a nation, we're a net importer of seafood. Members will be very surprised to know an island nation like Australia, we import 70% of our seafood, which is just phenomenal. We import 70% of it. So we need to protect our fishing industry, our sea farmers, if you like, and we need to be producing more of our own seafood. To import 70% for an island nation is disgraceful. So we need to grow the sector, and we won't grow the sector by diminishing commercial fishing grounds in key areas. And that's what this federal government wind farm zone does. The Port of Lakes Entrance that I referred to earlier has the biggest throughput of seafood of any port in Victoria, and it has one of the biggest throughputs of seafood of any port in the nation. So we've got to be very careful in decisions we make off the coast of Gippsland to further reduce those fishing areas, because not only is it critical for the economy of my electorate, but it's critical for the state's economy and the nation's economy. It is a big industry. Also sitting there is more threats of extended and expanded marine park areas that again have the possibility of excluding more fishermen out of these zones. Now, we cannot continue to put impediments in front of this sector. That's why I raised this issue, because this bill goes to land tenure. And from up to 3 nautical miles offshore, I can imagine if we get wind farms being developed in Bass Strait, we will have these tentacles of cables coming in. I believe there's some talk about it linking up with the Basslink infrastructure on land in Gippsland, but we will have cables coming in from the different wind farms. And when we get inside those 3 nautical miles, that impacts our inshore trawl fishery, that impacts some of our Danish seiner fisheries that operate in the state waters. It's also an issue for the federal waters, but this is the state waters. And I would hope that the Minister of the day, or the ministers in charge of their respective portfolios, are going to take this into consideration. We don't know if these cables are going to be trenched. If they're going to be trenched, come out and tell us, and the fishermen can still go over the ocean floor. But if they're not going to be trenched, it will impact on key fishing grounds. The other option, Acting Speaker, is the government might talk about compensating fishermen. We're going to take some grounds off you. We will compensate the fishermen for those easements that we have where this infrastructure is going to come ashore. Now, that's a pretty quick sugar hit for some of the existing licence holders, but we've got to be better than that. We've got to protect our food producers both on land and on the water. To continue to take grounds away and just say we'll compensate is just going to drive up more imports. And that 70% of imported seafood that we have will get greater, and the amount that we are producing locally will continue to reduce. Now, I also noted, and as has been discussed in this chamber before, and I think the member for Gippsland South may have mentioned it in his contribution, is that the government announced that it's going to fast-track a lot of these proposals, these renewables projects, through the bureaucracy system to avoid any hold-ups. Now, many property holders on land have expressed concerns that they're just going to be pushed to the side while decisions are made. We also need to make sure we're not only consulting with people who have land holdings, we need to be consulting with the fishing fleet, both commercial and recreational, that uses these waters within the 3 nautical mile zone. Speaker, to ignore their concerns or not to consult with them could have significant impacts for their ability to catch their quota and maintain their business viability. The other one I want to touch on before I finish, Acting Speaker, is the need to be able to consult with communities. As I mentioned, that the eastern end of the federal wind zone is right off the coast of Lakes Entrance. Now, I'm assuming, Acting Speaker, like most members in this chamber, you would have been to Lakes Entrance at some time. And you know that site when you drive down the Gemmies Point Hill, when you're coming over the hill and you're looking out to sea and you can see the entrance to the Gippsland Lakes there, you can see Bullock Island in the foreground, you've got Lake Reeve, you know, down to Fraser Island, Flanagan Island. It is, people stop. There's a look out there for a very good reason. What we don't want is wind farms on the horizon. There is a lot of area of coastline where there is no development, and I think of the area... About 90 miles of it. I think of the area between, from about Ocean Grange right down to Mans McLaughlin's beach down that way. There's a lot of area in between those 2 locations where there is no development, and in fact it's pretty marshy, mosquito-infested swampland in some of it. We need to be able to make sure that we do not refuse the right of communities in tourism areas to have input into these processes. We're going to get this right. We're going to get one chance, and we've got to get it right that first time. So please, I urge the government to not wave through the approvals processes without engaging with the communities, because the communities and people like the commercial fishing industry and the recreational fishing industry, input from them will help us get this right in the first place, so that we don't end up with legal challenges, we don't end up with having to revisit legislation in the Parliament. I can understand that there's a need to streamline the process, but streamlining the process should not come at the expense of talking to those very, very important industry representative groups. And I'll finish my contribution, Speaker, by urging the government to please open the lines of communication.